To conclude this module on crime and this subtopic of victimization, I hope to have demonstrated that victims are really not that evident in Hollywood film. They're usually removed to the side, or they're taken out of the picture as quickly as possible so that we can focus on images of redemption, exaltation, and the empowerment of the hero. And the exception here is this carnivalesque concept that we raised in Arlington Road, where we have this need to really see the tables turned and the king become a fool for a day. And reading Bakhtin will be very useful for thinking about Arlington Road in that context. And of course, having looked at Oedipus and read the Poetics by Aristotle. Ultimately, though, we have this vicarious need in society to feel empowered along with a hero and to follow that journey of empowerment. And why is the case that we need this? Well, we like to see a victim become a person who can exalt themselves because this helps us avoid our anxieties about being passive in our social roles, which so many of us have to be. And the reality is that few of us are rulers in society. Most of us are maybe not slaves to bosses, but we often feel like we're the slaves of our bosses and organizations, and that there are so many injustices against us. So it's not just that the crime genre is about injustices at a level of the law, but there's just injustices in organization itself. And so we harbor feelings about this to the extent that so many aspects of media encourage us to want revenge against these injustices, and especially those that are supported by a government and an economy that seems designed to exploit us. And if we take this interpretation seriously, we find that it's really, really difficult to tolerate endless images of victims on the screen, which is why the victim transformation to avenger holds so much appeal, because it's not just about the fight against crime, it's a fight against the injustice in the world as such. And so by associating an active protagonist that can stand against the things that destroy us, both criminally and organizationally in society, we temporarily evade our fears about being wounded. We get to evade our fears about death. And we're going to revisit those concepts when we talk about the horror genre later. But when it comes to crime, the minimization of victimhood leads us to being able to have a maximization of power and action that leads to exoneration, and we have those scenes of exaltation of all power. So I'm thinking of that scene in Death Wish where Paul Kersey points his gun and shoots. This scene is so important because it virtually erases all and any signs that that character had ever been a victim. And if you think of that scene and how it plays out in the whole Death Wish series all over, from beginning to end, this takes a role of the equalizer in society and allows us to engage in that. And that is, as I hope to show, quite different in Thelma and Louise, where you have this ironic scene of exaltation where suicide is shown to be a very empowering role, given that context, given a world where no one has power to change the existing status quo, and the only way out seems to be to take that road. You know, it's a road movie that ends mid-flight, so to speak. As the road ends, they just keep flying along it. So very interesting metaphor to think about. And of course, I've urged you to look at Arlington Road as you study genre, because Arlington Road, to wrap all this up, shows a character who's seeking empowerment because he believes that he's living with neighbors who want to kill people, who want to harm others. But at the same time, everything that he does to defeat them leads to him being the one who harms the most people, and he becomes the destroyer. And there's this conspiracy plot that works so well because Michael Faraday conceives of himself as the victim. And as in Death Wish, the victim becomes the destroyer, but in this case, the protagonist winds up destroying himself and others. He winds up destroying the same people he tries to protect. And so we can't really give a definitive definition of what victimhood is like and a definitive definition of the crime genre. But what we do know is that the more that we add details to our definition, the more that we get out of thinking about these conditions of what genre is. So in thinking this way, I'm trying to show that even though we can give a prototypical definition of a genre like the crime genre, when we take something like the concept of the victim, we begin to see just how complex that having a prototypical definition can be, and we wonder about the limits of definition, because we're trying to chisel out a better definition of what crime is, what a crime genre is, but then when we take up this question of victimization, we begin to see that there are so many borders that it shares with other issues. And is Thelma and Louise a crime genre picture, or is it a road movie, or does it transcend the genre? And then we look at Arlington Road and think about how it connects with this Oedipus question, and I imagine myself that it doesn't belong to the crime genre at all, but rather it connects deeply with the Oedipal genre, where the cure is a poison and the poison is a cure, in the way that I've been suggesting. And we end up, in thinking this way, learning about both the ways that making genre definitions is very, very powerful for clean classification, but it also opens up so many questions that breaks down the possibility of looking at genre, and we want to find examples that transcend that. Because certainly Death Wish is something that is really pretty easy to categorize, but something like Thelma and Louise and Arlington Road, they are transcending this. And I would argue that Minority Report is a similar situation. Yes, it has crime genre elements, and yes, it has all kinds of science fiction, but it balances so many things, these tensions that we've talked about in the inner form, with reason versus passion and innocence versus experience and the body versus soul, that it sort of transcends the whole notion of genre and maybe reaches this Oedipal genre that I've been suggesting. Now, we're going to ponder this further, but for now, I want to turn to the action genre, and every film that we've looked at so far contains elements of action. But by looking intensively at the action genre itself, we're going to pick up more ways about thinking about this problem of categorization, about how we can create categories and then find that they don't really hold at all, or some examples seem to support the category of genre that we've chosen and others break it apart. And I want to hear your thoughts in our discussion group about this as we turn to the action genre, and I look forward to engaging with you there.